All right, hello, all you Gloomhaven players out there. I spend a lot of time on the Gloomhaven subreddit, and I have noticed quite a few new players who are struggling a little bit with the game and asking for advice and help. And so I figured I would go ahead and throw some tips and tricks out there. I've got like over 3,000 hours with the game. I do all kinds of speed runs, challenge runs, increased difficulty runs, and I have learned a very large amount doing that. So I could probably ramble on forever about this game, so I've decided to limit myself to three primary topics, and I'm going to try to go into them in a little bit of detail. But I will get you so good at this game that you have to increase the difficulty because your group is just killing it and winning every single time. So the three topics we're really going to try to hit today. Number one is preventing damage. Number two is we, not me. And number three is everything you need to know about lost cards. So let's go ahead and jump on into it. We will start with defense, preventing damage. Defense is the most important aspect when you're playing Gloomhaven. You can't turn the game into a competition of who has a bigger stick, because spoilers, it's the monsters. If we just look at the first scenario, Black Barrow, on normal difficulty in a 3-player game, there are 14 monsters spread across 3 rooms with a combined 85 HP, with some shields sprinkled in there. If we have a 3-player party of Brute, Scoundrel, Spellweaver, we have 24 HP compared to their 85. And they're hitting for an average of 2.5 damage per turn. We're maybe doing 3.5, 4 damage per turn. It's not going to work if we turn the game into a turn-based game where we always go fast, we walk up to them and hit them. They hit us. We hit them. They hit us. We die way before they do. They also have infinite stamina because of the card system, and we obviously do not. So, defense is more important than offense and what you should prioritize. So, I have a list of priorities that I go through when I'm in the card selection phase to help me come up with efficient and safe turns. So, first, you ask yourself, am I safe? If you are, no problem. Go slow, go in, play an attack, do some damage, win the game. Easy peasy. If you're not, that's when we start the defensive checklist. So our first priority on the defensive checklist is kill stuff. Best defense is a good offense. If you can kill stuff, you're in a great spot, and that should be your priority. But first turn of a scenario, as soon as you open a new room, you're never going to be able to just kill everything, otherwise the game would be super easy. So that's when we move on to priority number 2, crowd control. Stuns, disarms, immobilize, and even muddle, they're all amazing resources that can completely prevent you from taking damage. Even when you're playing a tanky 10 HP class, you're going to die in 4 to 5 hits, which can happen as early as round 2 if you just run in there and get surrounded and get wrecked. Crowd controlling enemies and chipping away at their health bars will put you in a position where the next turn you can go fast and kill them. A la priority 1. Priority number 3 is going to be to run away. An enemy who can't reach you can't hurt you. Once you see the monster ability cards, you'll know if you can put enough separation between them to prevent any damage. Most monsters, basically every monster in the game, their ability cards work in such a way where when they move extra, they deal less damage. When they're dealing extra damage, they move less. So if you can get 3 to 4 spaces away, you know you're going to be safe from their most dangerous cards. But if you're not going to be able to escape from them, then it's on to your 4th priority, which is tanking damage. So this is going to happen in every single scenario. You are going to be forced to face tank damage, and so you just have to do it intelligently. You have to do it with intentionality. If you're playing a brute, and you're up there in melee range, you know they're going to walk up and hit you in melee range, you need to position yourself in an intelligent place. Use obstacles, doorways, the wall to your advantage to reduce your surface area so you're not getting hit. Monsters also help you with that. So you can position yourself in such a way that only 2 monsters are going to reach you, and you'll be a lot safer. Cragheart is also really good at positioning because you can just create 2 obstacles next to you with Avalanche, and then maybe only 1 melee monster is reaching you at a time. And everybody else has to run all the way around, and it saves you a lot of time and prevents a lot of damage. Every single turn where you're purposely going to be tanking damage, try to find a way to prevent that damage as much as possible, to reduce the number of attacks coming into you. Your fifth and final defensive priority is going to be healing damage. Heals are not very good in Gloomhaven, but they are basically required. Every team composition should have 2 to 3 heals in it, based on how many characters there are. But they're not for use during battle. You should only be using your heals in between rooms, or when your ally is going to kill the last monster and then you're going to heal them up after, or something like that. Heals do not happen during battle. Almost all of the level 1 heals are just 3 HP, and if you're going to be hit for 2.5 anyway from the monsters, that 3 health didn't end up progressing your game state at all. So heal in between rooms and while you're long resting and while you're looting, but if you're healing in battle, it should be for emergency reasons only. And I think that's basically everything I have for the card selection phase, and preventing as much damage as possible. That should be your number 1 priority while you're selecting your cards. And so let's go ahead and move on to tip number 2, which is we, not me. So think of your adventuring party as a whole, not just yourself. The checklist we just went through in tip number 1 should be done party-wide, not just you yourself. It does no good if both the Mind Thief and Tinkerer look at step number 2, priority 2, and they think crowd control, okay, I'm going to stun that closest enemy, but they don't communicate it, and then they both play their stun cards, and then all of a sudden, you've just stacked crowd control and been extremely inefficient. This is where you're forced to communicate, but Gloomhaven is not a game of perfect information. You can't say, okay, well, I'm going to go at 20 and stun that guard right there. So let's go through just an example turn 1 in scenario 1 of Black Barrow and how I would communicate between my parties, my players, my characters. Alright, I'll start us off. I'm planning on going fast and controlling an enemy. Okay, well if that'll help keep me safe, then I'm comfortable moving forward, going fast, moving forward, doing some damage, and tanking a hit or 2. Okay, yeah, that should work. What about you, Spellweaver? Well, if you guys have us defended for this turn, then maybe I'll go super slow, move in, crowd control for the next turn, and then how about we all go really fast and burst them? Okay, well if we're going to do big damage next turn, then on this turn I'll play this card instead to set an element, and I'm ready. Ready. So in my theoretical example here, we went through the process relatively quickly. We're taking on 6 enemies, but we're only going to take damage from 2 of them onto the Brute, while also getting set up for a really nice turn 2, where we have everyone in position and we can burst all of these guards over on the right, run away from the guards on the left, and we've cleared half of this room and we've only taken 2 attacks of damage. As a group, we applied crowd control without stacking it, and we planned out how many hits our frontline would have to tank, and most importantly, we got the following turn prepared. Your skill level in Gloomhaven is going to skyrocket if you can make all of your plans at least 2 turns long instead of just 1. This way you can get really good use out of going slow, especially on your squishy characters when you don't want to get hit. So one more thing I want to touch on in tip number 2 is that squishy characters have HP bars too. 6 HP versus 10 is not a very big difference. It's totally fine to designate your Brute or your Cragheart as a frontliner, but they are not your be-all, end-all tank. Every character should be aiming to tank at least 1, hopefully 2 attacks per room. If the monster ability cards have already been revealed, and say they're faster than your Cragheart, who's about to get attacked 3 times this round, you can move yourself forward so that you'll be next to them, and one of those attacks is going to come into you instead of the Cragheart. And if they're only being hit 2 times instead of 3, that's going to significantly increase their longevity. If you can do this 4 or 5 times throughout a scenario over the course of like 30, 40 rounds, you're potentially preventing 12 to 15 damage from hitting your ally, which is the difference between them having to lose like maybe 2 or 3 cards to not die. And you were probably planning on long resting anyway, and so you might as well get 2 HP out of that free 2 HP heal that you would have been healing with it. Just if you do go in to face tank damage, make sure that you have at least one fast guard so that you can escape the next turn. That's why it's always really important to have your plans be 2 turns long, because if you plan to go in and, okay, I'll tank it 1 hit this turn, but you're not fast next turn, you're screwed. And on to number 3, Lost Cards. I love playing Lost Cards. Lost Cards are the most fun part of Gloomhaven, and a really, really key, important part of this game. So I am all about playing Lost Cards, but you have to know their cost. So if we pull up this little graph here, we'll just look at a 10 card class. So let's look at the Mind Thief. We start with 10 cards, which means we can play 5 turns of 2 cards each until we're forced to rest. After we rest, we're going to go down to 9 cards, which means we get 4 turns. After those 4 turns, we'll have 1 card left over, but we can't play a turn with 1 card, so we'll have to rest, and then we go down to 8 cards total. And so you'll see we have 4 turns again, and then 3 turns, and 3 turns, and 2 turns, and 2 turns, and 1 turn, and 1 turn, and then we are exhausted. So that's if we play no lost cards throughout the whole scenario. Now, if we play a lost card in our first rest cycle, so we start with 10 cards, we play 1 lost card, and so we'll get our 5 turns, but then after we rest, we're down to 8 cards now, which means instead of having 2 groups of 4 turns, we're only going to have 1. So we lost 4 turns of stamina by playing that lost card in the first rest cycle. Now that's potentially okay if you can get 4 turns worth of value out of that lost card. Or if you are playing a high hand size class like the Tinkerer, and you start with 12, well, you have 11 turns more stamina than your Brute or your Mind Thief does. So you don't necessarily need to be alive 11 turns longer than they do. So if you play 1 loss early on a high hand size character, it's not nearly as impactful as it is on a 9 or a 10 class character. So it's totally fine to play something like Ink Bomb early, or the net or the flamethrower on the Tinkerer in the first room, just to kind of get you more on par with the rest of your group and how many cards you have left, especially if you can get high value out of that card. But as scenarios go on longer and longer, and you get into the second and into the third and into the potentially 4th or 5th room, that's when you can start looking to play a lost card, because your opportunity cost is a lot less. Once you're down to only having 5 cards left, if you play a lost card, you're only dropping 2 turns worth of stamina instead of the 4 or 5 that you were dropping if you had played it in your first rest cycle. So lost cards are really good. Just know the cost you are paying when you play one, and also look for combos. This is something you can do in between scenarios, not just during a scenario. Look for combos that will make your lost cards more efficient. Something like adding Forceful Storm and a Warhammer to the top loss of Unstable Upheaval. Take it from an attack 3 to an attack 5 that stuns. And if you consume Leaf, you can basically stun an entire room and hit them for an attack 5. That is an extremely efficient turn. If you're hitting 4 or 5 enemies, that's basically taking like 4 or 5 turns in that one single action. So you could play that lost card early and not even feel the pain because you were so efficient with that turn. So it's really good to look at your cards and find really good combos. Another one that I really like is on the Mind Thief. If you already have the Mind's Weakness up, then when you play the bottom of Fearsome Blade, you get to move forward and attack 4. If you have a Poison Dagger, you can poison them, and then you can use either the top of Perverse Edge or the top of Submissive Affliction, and it deals extra damage because they have a negative condition on them, the poison, but it also deals extra damage because they're poisoned. So that is much more of like a, I'm just trying to burst this one single target and then we'll win the scenario, or like this will be the guy that I take on in this final room. But if you're walking up to him and hitting him for 10 damage, on normal difficulty, that monster is dead. So it's really nice to just have a card to be like, okay, I can play these 2 cards together and that guy will die. But I think overall that is basically all I have for you. If you follow these 3 tips and tricks, your scenario win rate should go way up. So please feel free to leave a comment down below if this helped you out, or if my advice made you walk for it on your squishy character and you got one shot and died. It's not my fault. Have a good one, guys. Thanks.